My younger brother uninvited me from Christmas, claiming his elite new friends didn't want a loser, like me ruining their high-class aesthetic. What he conveniently forget was that I had been paying for his children's private school and his wife's luxury SUV for years. So I cancelled every payment and watched his world start to crumble. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting toward another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag in this video. Make sure to switch over now, so you do not miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The notification sound in my phone felt like a physical blow, mostly because my head was already pounding with the steady brutality of a jackhammer. I was curled in the fetal position in my living room, sofa wrapped in a miserable little fortress of used tissues, half-empty tea mugs, and a bottle of prescription painkillers that sat in the kiffy table like a judge. 3 days earlier, I had gone through an emergency appendectomy. It had not been clean and simple. There were complications, a minor infection, and a recovery that dragged like wet concrete. I was weak, pale, and shrinking inside my own body, the kind of small you become when pain decides it owns you. I reached for my phone with a trembling hand, not from emotion yet, but from the sheer exhaustion of moving. The name in the screen made a thin wave of relief pass through me. Adrian, my brother. Finally, he was checking on me. I had texted him and his wife Delilah, before surgery on again after I woke up. Delilah had sent a thumbs-up emoji. Adrian had given me nothing. But now he was calling, and for one naive second, I let myself believe it meant something. Hey, I crooked my throat raw, my voice sounding like gravel scraping glass. I'm back home. It's been rough, but I'm okay. Nora, listen. Adrian cut in, brisk and energized, completely empty of concern, like he was already halfway into the next moment. I heard street noise behind him, the cadence of fast footsteps, the hum of a life that was functioning. I don't have a lot of time. Delilah and I are finalizing the Christmas Eve dinner list. The caterers are coming in an hour for a consult. I blinked slowly, my brain dull under medication, trying to bridge the gap between the brother I hoped for and the voice I was hearing. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure what I can bring this year, since I can't really cook yet. But I ordered those vintage wines Delilah likes for the gift exchange. There was a pause heavy on sharp, like the silence itself had teeth. Yeah, Adrian said, and I could hear the grimace in his voice. The fake sympathy he used when he was about to do something selfish, but wanted to feel clean while doing it. About that? We're making some changes to the guest list this year. It's going to be a different vibe. Very high-end. Delilah invited the VP of marketing from her firm, and I've got 2 potential investors coming for the new venture. That sounds intense, I whispered, shifting my legs and wincing as my stitches pulled. But I can't just sit quietly in the corner. I won't be in the way. I really need to be around family. Being alone while recovering has been hard. Nora, he sighed impatient, as if I were a child insisting in something inconvenient. You're not listening. This isn't a family potluck. This is a networking event disguised as Christmas. Appearance is everything. And frankly, looking at how you've been lately, you don't fit the aesthetic. My breath caught painful and thin. Excuse me. You know what I mean. He pressed, sliding into that lecturing tone I hated, the wind that always implied. He was explaining reality to someone who didn't deserve it. You work from home, you live in sweatpants, you drive a Honda, you're comfortable. But these people, they shocks. Winners. Delilah is stressed about making a good impression. And having her sister-in-law, they're looking like some sick ghost who hasn't brushed her hair in a week, is not the image we're projecting. The room tilted, and the ache in my abdomen was suddenly smaller than the hello drop in my chest. You're uninviting me, I said so quietly, I barely heard myself. From Christmas. Because I had surgery and I don't wear Gucci. I'm uninviting you because you bring the energy down. Adrian snapped, dripping the polite venia like it had become too heavy to hold. We're trying to level up, Nora. You're stagnant. Just stay home, rest, poop your pills. We'll send leftovers if there are any. I have to go. The Qatar is here. The line went dead. I stayed at the black screen, my own reflection staring back pale and exhausted. Eyes ringed in shadows. He was right about one thing. I looked wrecked. But what echoed in my head was not my appearance. It was his words. No place for losers. I let the phone slip from my hand into the cockpit and shut my eyes. Het tears leaking out despite my best effort to stop them. It was not just the rejection. It was the audacity, the sheer blindness. The way he could stand in a latter I had held steady for years, and call me small. For an hour I cried until my ribs hurt. I grieved the brother I thought I had. I grieved the fragile little idea of family I had been clinging to, since our parents died 5 years ago. The house was paid off and quiet, and the quiet wrapped itself around me like a cold blanket, settling into my bones. But as the painkillers softened the sharp edges and the initial shock began to drain, something else took root in my chest. Knit sadness. Heat. Slow, deliberate, and cold at the same time. I pushed myself upright, wincing at the tug in my stitches, and shuffled to the kitchen to make tea. Every step reminded me how physically weak I was, which only made what Adrian did feel crueler. He knew I was alone. He knew I was in pain. And he kicked me anyway, because I didn't match his curated image. I sat at the kitchen island with my mug, staring at the steam, like it could tell me how a person becomes this. Then I unlocked my phone and opened Instagram. Delilah had posted a story 10 minutes earlier, a smooth video glide through their living room. Gold and white decorations. A massive tree that brushed the vaulted ceiling. Soft classical music in the background, the kind of soundtrack that tries to convince you the people living under it are better than you. The caption read, "Prepping for the biggest night of the year. Exclusive guest list only. High life success, no negativity." No negativity. Which meant no me. I watched it loop 3 times, jaw tight, stomach twisting. I zoomed in and saw the leather sectional I had helped them pick out. The win Adrian said they could not afford until the next deal landed. I saw the bay window, the manicured lawn, the glow of a life that looked expensive because it was being subsidized. And then I saw my nephew Oliver, running through the frame in his private school uniform, the win with the embroidered crest of Westbridge Preparatory. My thumb hovered over the screen. Adrian called me a loser. He called me stagnant. He said I didn't fit in with winners. I looked down at myself, oversized gray sweatpants and a stained hoodie, hat tied back like I had stopped trying. To the outside world, to Delilah's status-obsessed friends, I probably did look like a woman who had given up. But what they didn't know, what Adrian suddenly didn't remember, was what my quiet life had been paying for. I was a ghostwriter. My name was not in the bestsellers I built. My face was not in the glossy profiles of tech founders whose voices I crafted. I was the invisible engine behind other people's fame. I lived quietly in purpose. I saved aggressively in purpose. I invested in purpose. And because I lived quietly, Adrian assumed I was barely getting by. 3 years earlier, he sat at this very island with a glass of sketch, crying so hard he could not breathe, telling me his first startup had imploded, and the mortgage was 3 months behind. He forget who stepped in when Delilah threatened to leave if he could not maintain the lifestyle she believed was her birthright. I opened my banking app and scrolled past accounts. Adrian could not even imagine past numbers that didn't look real unless you understood patience. Untapped the tab labeled scheduled transfers. There they were, neatly arranged lifelines I had built into his month like a heartbeat. Recurring transfer $3,200, reference, Oliver and Sophie tuition. Recurring transfer $850, reference, Delilah lease, Range Rover. Recurring transfer $500, reference, family support groceries. I stayed at the list, the calm math of it, the quiet devotion I had been giving without applause. For 3 years, I had been prepping up the high-end life while they smiled into champagne and pretended the money came from Adrian's brilliance. Stagnant, I whispered into the empty kitchen. Loser. A smile touched my lips, net happy, net warm. But the kind of smile a demolition expert wears when she studies a building and already knows exactly where to place the charges. Adrian thought he was cutting off dead weight to make his life look sleeker. He didn't realize he was severing the roots. He wanted a Christmas for winners. Fine. But winners pay their own bills. To understand why it hurts so much, you have to understand our history. Adrian was 4 years older than me. The golden boy, the charismatic win. The win teachers adored and friends followed. I was the quiet one. The reader, the kid in the library with ink-smudged fingers. When our parents died in a car accident 5 years ago, the world rearranged itself. But in Adrian's mind, the roles stayed the same. He was the leader. I was the extra. The inheritance was split evenly. I invested mine. I bought a modest house, maxed out retirement accounts, and poured the rest into my business. I built a reputation in publishing as the fixer. The ghostwriter you called when you had a brilliant idea and no ability to turn it into a book. My rates were astronomical. My lifestyle was invisible. Adrian burned through his inheritance in 18 months. He invested in a luxury lifestyle brand that sold overpriced witches. It failed. He tried launching a tech incubator without knowing how to code. It failed. He bought a massive house he could not afford because he believed perception was reality. 3 years ago, reality hit. It was raining the night he showed up at my door, soaked on shaking, eyes red, voice cracking. Credit, cards maxed. Mortgage behind. Delilah threatening to take the kids and move back to her parents' estate. I can't lose them, he sobbed, clutching my hand like it was a lifeline. I just need time. I have a new project. It'll be huge. I just need runway. Please. You're the only one I can trust. I could not say no. I could not let my niece and nephew lose their home. So we made a deal. A private deal that never existed in paper, but existed in my bank statements. I would cover essentials directly. Tuition, car payment. I didn't want the money going into Adrian's account, where it would vanish into business expenses. In exchange, he promised to get a real job, stabilize, and pay me back eventually. He never get a real job. He consulted. He never paid me back a dime. Instead, he slowly morphed into a stranger, who treated me like a resource he deserved. And Delilah, not evil, just profoundly shallow, became the voice in his ear that said they deserved more, always more, and that my quiet life was embarrassing. She looked at my Hinda and once asked, smiling like it was a joke, "Oh, my gid, are you still driving that?" Over the last year, gratitude turned into entitlement. They stopped saying thank you when I picked up the kids. They invited me only when they needed a babysitter. Adrian made little digs at Thanksgiving. "It's cute you write little stories," he would say. "But when are you going to join the real business world? Scale up." I always bit my tongue. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself he was insecure because his younger sister was saving him. But this phone call, this no place for losers speech, was not insecurity. It was contempt. I thought of the kids. Oliva struggling with math while I tutored him. Over Zoom twice a week. Sophie loving to draw while I sent her professional supplies every month. A voice in my head whispered that if I cut the money they would suffer. My finger hovered over the console button beside Westbridge Preparatory. Then I heard Adrian's voice again, clear as a slap. "We're trying to level up. You're stagnant." He was using my money to cosplay success while spitting in the person funding it. He was teaching his children that their aunt was lesser because she didn't wear labels. He was teaching them love was transactional and appearance was good. If I kept paying, I was not protecting them. I was enabling a lie that would eventually crush them. I sat up straighter, ignoring the shop pull in my stitches. It was time for Adrian to learn what stagnant felt like. It was time to introduce him to the reality he had been avoiding for 3 years. I was not just a sister anymore. I was the bunk, and the bunk was closing for the holidays. My finger lowered steady now and pressed cancel. A prompt appeared in my screen, polite and final. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer? This action can't be undone." I tapped, yes? The screen refreshed. Transfer cancelled. Tuition, gun. Next, Delilah's Range Rover lease cancelled. Next, family support cancelled. 3 taps. Nearly $5,000 a month evaporated from their lives. The kitchen was silent, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt powerful, like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for years. And I was still not done. Because real anger is cold, And cold anga doesn't just stop paying it plans. I opened my laptop and pulled up my work email, ignoring the deadline blinking for a ghostwritten memoir for a tech CEO. That could wait. I started a new document and began building a spreadsheet with the same ruthless precision. I used to structure other people's stories. I pulled up bank statements going back 3 years, itemizing every transfer, every emergency bill, every time I covered a networking dinner, because Adrian forget his wallet, every veterinary payment for the pobre dig, every fee, every rescue. The total climbed until it made my stomach tighten. $150,000. A house. A retirement cushion. A life. I stayed at the number and felt something inside me go quiet, like the last strand of guilt snapping. I needed to know how deep their delusion went. How far the lie had traveled. Adrian mentioned a new venture and potential investors, vague as always. I remembered the name of his LLC, because I had paid the filing fee 6 months earlier. Prestige Meridian Holdings, a name that sounded expensive and meant nothing. I legged into the state business registry and found the listing. Active, but net in good standing. He had missed an annual filing. Then I went to LinkedIn and searched the person Delilah was desperate to impress. The VP of marketing she would be smiling at, while pretending her life was earned. Her name was Lauren. I didn't know her, but we shared a mutual connection. A literary agent I had worked with before. I sent a message casual, almost friendly. Hey, long time. Random question. Do you know Lauren from Delilah's firm? My sister-in-law is trying to impress her this Christmas. Just curious what her deal is. 20 minutes later, a reply appeared. Nora, good to hear from you. Lauren is notorious. Total shock. Obsessed with status. If you're not wearing the right label, you don't exist. Good luck. I stayed at the screen and understood the truth with perfect clarity. They were not just being cruel. They were terrified. Terrified of being exposed as frauds to people who could smell desperation like blood in water. And I, recovering from surgery in sweatpants, was the visible proof that their world was not as polished as they claimed. I set my mug down carefully, breathing through the ache in my stitches, and felt the story shift. Adrian thought he had uninvited a loser to protect his aesthetic. What he had actually done was start a countdown. Because the moment he severed me from the table, he also severed himself from the money, keeping the table standing. Began it with another phone call, but with clarity. The kind of clarity that arrives when the illusion finally shatters and you are left staring at the machinery behind it. I sat at my kitchen island, ling after canceling the transfers, the steam from my tea fading into nothing, and opened a fresh spreadsheet. If Adrian wanted to pretend I was irrelevant, then I needed to see in black and white exactly how relevant I had been. I went back 3 full years through my financial records, line by line, transaction by transaction. Tuition payments to Westbridge Preparatory, lease payments to the Range Rover dealership, temporary business bridge loans, short-term liquidity assistance, emergency, childcare, investor dinner reimbursement. The numbers accumulated with cold indifference. 10,000, 25, 50, 100,000. When the total crossed $153,000, I leaned back slowly, the movement tugging painfully at my stitches. But the physical discomfort felt almost grounding, compared to the realization settling over me. I hadn't been helping my brother. I had been financing a performance. I had funded a curated identity, built entirely in borrowed confidence and my quiet bank account. My phone buzzed. A text from Delilah. We need to talk. Adrian says there was a banking error. I stayed at the message for a long moment before typing back. There was no error. 3 debts appeared instantly. Then vanished. Then appeared again. Finally, call us. Nit please. Nit, are you okay? Just a command. I set the phone face down and opened the State Business Registry website instead. Prestige Meridian Holdings. Even hit it. Status, active. Compliance, delinquent annual filing. I almost laughed. Adrian had been pitching investors while failing to file basic documentation. I pulled up LinkedIn again and reviewed the profiles of the 2 potential investors he had bragged about. One specialized in early-stage tech ventures, with strict due diligence requirements. The other was known for publicly cutting ties with founders who misrepresented financial positions. Adrian was inviting sharks into a glass house, and he thought I was the liability. My phone rang. Adrian. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Then again. I finally answered in the fourth attempt, keeping my voice neutral. What? What the hell did you do? He exploded without greeting. I could hear Delilah in the background, her voice sharp and panicked. The school called. They said the tuition payment failed. They said you removed your card. That's correct. Silence. Then lower on more dangerous why. I folded my hands in front of me in the table. Because you told me there was no place for losers at your Christmas event. I assume loser money didn't belong there either. Are you serious right now? He shouted. The tuition is due in 2 days. If it isn't paid, Oliver and Sophie can't enroll next semester. Then I suggest you pay it. I don't have that kind of liquidity sitting around. He snapped. Everything is tied up in the launch. That sounds like a you problem. I surprised myself with how steady I sounded. There was a pause in the line, thick and stunned. You're punishing the kids because I hurt your feelings, he said finally, grasping at moral high ground. No, I replied quietly. I'm stepping back from financing your lifestyle. There's a difference. You promised to help. I helped for 3 years. I opened the spreadsheet and read the total aloud. $153,412. That's net help, Adrian. That's a private subsidy. I heard Delilah take the phone from him. Nora, she said in a tone she probably used in real estate negotiations. Let's be rational. You're recovering from surgery. Emotions are high. Turn the payments back on. You can still come to Christmas.
We'll make space.
I let out a short, incredulous laugh. You'll make space. Don't twist this, she snapped. We're building relationships that matter. You wouldn't understand that world. The world I funded. I asked softly. Silence again. Then Adrian's voice returned furious. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was one comment. It wasn't one comment, I said. It was a summary. I ended the call before my hands started shaking. The quiet afterward felt different this time. Knit hello. Charged. Within an hour my phone erupted. A message from our aunt asking if I was stable. A voicemail from Adrian claiming I was jeopardizing the children's futures. Another text from Delilah saying, if you do this, there's no coming back. I saved every message. Screenshot. Archive. Forward to a new folder. If this escalated, I would have documentation. Then came the notification that erased the last fragment of guilt I had been holding into. Fraud alert. Attempted charge of $5,000 at a luxury department store. I logged into my credit card account and stayed at the details. It was the emergency card I had given Adrian 2 years ago. When his car broke down, I had forgotten he still had the number. He was trying to use it. My chest went cold, not with anger but with recognition. This was not desperation. This was entitlement. He believed my money was his fallback. I called the bank immediately and froze the account. Mark it as stolen, I instructed. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The betrayal was no longer emotional. It was financial. Systemic. I picked up my phone and dialed someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Clara, I need you, I said when my friend answered. Clara was a lawyer, sharp and unflinching. I need to formalize a loan and possibly file a lien. Against your brother? She asked, carefully. Yes. I sent her the spreadsheet on screenshots. 20 minutes later, she called back. You have texts where he acknowledges repayment. Several. Then we can send a demand letter. It won't get you immediate cash, but it will freeze him. If he tries to refinance or sell the house, your claim attaches. I looked at the calendar in the wall. December 20th. Christmas Eve was 4 days away. Send it to arrive Christmas Eve, I said. Clara was quiet for a beat. Are you sure? He wanted a high-end Christmas, I replied. Let's give him a premium delivery. After hanging up, I felt something settle inside me. Knit revenge. Alignment. I had spent years smoothing over Adrian's case, so the family narrative would remain intact. I had confused love with rescue. But love doesn't require self-erasure. Love doesn't demand humiliation. That night I slept without painkillers. For the first time since surgery. Not because my body hurt less, but because my mind was no longer fighting itself. The next morning, I received a message from a mother at Westbridge Preparatory. I heard a rumor Oliva might not return next term. Is everything okay? The school had begun contacting parents about unpaid balances. The illusion was cracking publicly. I typed a measured reply. Financial restructuring is underway. I'm no longer managing the account. I pressed send and understood that the Whisper network of status conscious families would carry the rest. Adrian had feared embarrassment more than anything. And now it was unfolding without me lifting another finger. I closed my laptop and walked slowly to the window, looking out at the quiet street. Snow had begun to fall in soft, deliberate flakes. Christmas was 4 days away. Adrian had uninvited me to preserve an aesthetic. He had believed I would remain silent, compliant, ashamed. Instead, I had removed the foundation. And foundations, once again, do not negotiate. They collapse. I wrapped my sweater tighter around myself and felt something I had not felt in years. Not anger. Not sorrow. Relief. For the first time since our parents died, I was no longer carrying him. I was standing in my own ground. Didn't it begin with an explosion? It began with silence, the kind that hums under the surface before something gives way. For 2 days after the fraud alert on the call to Clara, there was nothing from Adrian except shot, clipped messages that alternated between fury and desperation. Fix this. We'll talk after Christmas. You're making a mistake. I did not respond. I conserved my energy the way you do when your body is still healing. And you understand that stress is a physical thing, something that seeps into stitches and inflames what is trying to close. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I reviewed every chat account, every digital subscription I had once quietly covered, every automatic payment I had set up during one of Adrian's many temporary crises. I changed passwords. I removed my information. I closed access points. Each small action felt like sealing a door in a house that had been left open for too long. In the morning of December 23rd, Clara called. The demand letter is finalized, she said. Certified delivery, signature required. It will arrive tomorrow by noon. I imagined the scene without trying to. The doorbell. The courier. The envelope heavy with paper and consequence. I thanked her and ended the call, then sat very still at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Oliva. Aunt Nora, are you coming tomorrow? Huh. My throat tightened. If cost the children had not been told the full story. I won't be staying, I typed carefully. But I'll drop off your gifts. 3 debts appeared almost instantly. Dad is stressed. Mim keeps arguing. I stayed at the message longer than I should have. Children always know more than adults think. It's not your fault, I replied. None of this is your fault. That afternoon, I received another notification from my bank. This time it was not fraud, but a returned payment alert from the Range Rover leasing company. Adrian had attempted to submit a partial payment using one of his own accounts, and it had bounced. The account balance was insufficient. The repo process had likely already begun. I closed my eyes and felt the strange mixture of sadness and inevitability that had been hovering over me for days. He had built a life that required constant applause and external validation. But he had never built the infrastructure to support it. And infrastructure, unlike applause, can't be faked indefinitely. That evening, my phone rang again. Delilah. I let it ring twice before answering. What do you want? I asked, not unkindly, just tired. You filed something, she said without greeting. Her voice was no longer controlled. It was brittle. Adrian get a notification from the county registry. A lien warning. It's not a warning, I said calmly. It's a demand for repayment. He owes me $153,000. You can't do this to us right now, she hissed. We have investors coming tomorrow. Do you have any idea what this looks like? I almost laughed at the phrasing. Not what it is. What it looks like? It looks like unpaid debt, I replied. It looks like financial misrepresentation. You're trying to sabotage his deal. No, I corrected. His deal was sabotaged the moment he lied about his financial stability. There was a pause in the line, and for the first time since this began, I heard something close to fear in her breathing. If this collapses, she said slowly, we lose the house. I leaned back in my chair, wincing slightly at the pull in my abdomen. You were willing to lose me, I said quietly. You were willing to call me an embarrassment because I didn't match your aesthetic. Why is the house more important than family? She did not answer that question. Instead, she said, turn the payments back in, and we'll withdraw the comment. We'll apologize publicly if you want. The FA hung there hello and transactional. I realized in that moment that to her, everything was negotiable. Dignity, truth, apology. All of it had a price tag. No, I said simply, and ended the call. Christmas Eve arrived grey and sharp, the air biting against my skin as I stepped outside with two neatly wrapped buxies in my hands. I drove slowly to Adrian's house, my modest, paid-off Honda humming steadily beneath me. The neighborhood looked exactly as it always did this time of year, pristine lawns dusted, with snow identical wreaths and polished doors, a silent competition of holiday perfection. I parked down the street and sat for a moment, watching the house. Lights glowed in every window. Through the front glass I could see silhouettes moving. Glasses raised, laughter floating, faintly into the cold air each time the door opened. A black town Kia pulled into the driveway. Then a sleek electric sedan. The investors had arrived. The sharks were circling, unaware that the water beneath them was shallow and cracking. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching against the frozen pavement, and walked toward the house. The Range Rover was parked along the curb, gleaming under the porch lights, as if nothing were wrong. But I knew the repossession auto was active. I reached the door and lifted my hand to Nick. Before I could, it swung open. Adrian stood there in a velvet dinner jacket that probably cost more than my first vehicle. His expression shifted instantly from forced host smile to panic. What are you doing here? He whispered harshly, stepping outside and pulling the door nearly closed behind him. I told you I'm not staying, I said evenly. These are for the kids. I held out the buxies. Smile, he muttered through clenched teeth. Do not make a scene. Adrian, a voice called from inside, crisp and commanding. Is everything all right? He hesitated for half a second too long. Then he stepped aside, forcing a smile and motioning me in. The warmth hit me immediately, scented with pine and catered food. Conversation faltered as eyes turned toward me. I stood there in dark jeans, a wool coat, and practical boots. Knit to socialite. Knit curated. Just real. Delilah emerged from the dining area, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Her face drained of color. Nora, she said thinly. We weren't expecting you. I won't be long, I replied, my voice carrying more steadily than I felt. Then one of the guests stepped forward. A woman in an emerald coat, elegant and observant. She studied my face, then Adrian's. Nora? She asked. As in Nora Hale. My last name sounded different in her mouth. Recognizing. Adrian laughed too loudly. My sister, he said quickly. She writes, bleh. The woman ignored him. You structured the Horizon memoir, she said. On the Terratech Leadership Series. The room went still. Yes, I answered. I did. My firm tried to hire you last year, she said. Your retainer fee was substantial. A faint ripple moved through the crowd. Adrian's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. She exaggerates, he began. I reached into my bag and removed a thick envelope. I placed it gently in the side table beside the champagne. This, I said calmly, is a formal demand for repayment of $153,000 in documented loans. Adrian lunged forward, but one of the investors placed a firm hand in his arm. Let her finish, the investor said coolly. I canceled the tuition payments 3 weeks ago. I continued. On the vehicle lease. Because I was informed there was no place for losers at this event. I assume my money didn't belong. At that exact moment, orange light flashed through the bay windows. Heads turned in unison. Outside, a tow truck had backed into the driveway, its lights strobing across the snow. The driver stepped out and nicked sharply in the glass. Order for repossession, he called. 2,000 rin.
It's to Rova.
Keys are hook. The silence inside the house became absolute. Delilah's tray slipped from her hands, porcelain shattering a crisp white tile. The investors exchanged a look that didn't require words. The emerald-coated woman stepped back slowly. "We should go," she said quietly. They walked past Adrian without another glance, past the envelope, past the broken glass, and out into the cold night. I stood there for a moment longer, watching the perfect aesthetic fracture in real time. Adrian's face looked smaller, stripped of bravado. "You destroyed everything," he whispered. I met his eyes. "No," I said. I stopped holding it up. I turned and walked out before he could respond. Snow fell steadily as the tow truck lifted the SUV from the curb. I get into my Honda and closed the door gently, breathing in the quiet. For the first time in years, I was not carrying someone else's illusion. I was carrying only myself, and that felt lighter than any luxury he had ever tried to project. Started the moment I pulled away from the curb and the strobing orange light of the tow truck disappeared behind the snow. My hands were still in the steering wheel, but they didn't feel like mine. They felt like borrowed hands, steadied by something older than rage. I drove home slowly, the heater working overtime, my stitches aching every time I inhaled too deeply. And yet the pain in my body felt strangely manageable. Compared to the quiet relief settling into my chest, I didn't feel victorious. I felt unburdened. For years I had mistaken responsibility for love, and love for loyalty, and loyalty for silence. That night I realized silence is not loyalty. Silence is permission. When I get home, I left the porch light off and walked into my dark living room, like a person returning from a storm. I set my keys down, hung my coat, and stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of my refrigerator and the faint tick of the wall clock. My phone lit up with notifications almost immediately. Calls, texts, voicemails. Adrian, Delilah, unfamiliar numbers, and at least one unknown caller that I knew in my bones belonged to someone sent to do their emotional dirty work. I didn't open them. I brewed hot chocolate, the way I used to when I was a child and our parents argued in low voices behind closed doors. Back then sweetness was a shield. Now it was a ritual, a reminder that I was allowed to soothe myself without earning it. I sat on the couch with a blanket over my knees, my body still weak, and watched a mindless movie until my eyes grew heavy. The quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt like oxygen. I slept deeper than I had since the surgery, not because the incision magically stopped hurting, but because the war inside my head had finally ended. The next morning was Christmas Day, and the snow outside made everything look deceptively clean, like the world had pressed a reset button. I woke up to a barrage of new messages. I opened my phone and saw a paragraph from Delilah, written in the tone of someone who believed outrage was power. She accused me of humiliating her in front of important people, of sabotaging Adrian's once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, of traumatizing the children, being unstable, of weaponizing money, of being jealous. The word jealous was the one that made me smile, because it was so perfectly backward. Jealousy is wanting what someone else has. I didn't want the house. I didn't want the parties. I didn't want they friends who measured human worth in labels. I wanted what I already had, a quiet life with a clear conscience, and a paid-off home on the kind of stability that doesn't require an audience. Adrian's voicemail was shorter and uglier. He didn't yell. He sounded tired, like someone who had finally met gravity. "You didn't have to do that," he said. And his voice cracked in the last word, as if he wanted to imply I was the cruel one. As if my refusal to keep lying was the violence. I deleted the voicemail without replying. Then I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo, grainy and angled, of my own front door, taken from the sidewalk. Beneath it, a single line. "Nice place. Must be easy when you don't have kids." My stomach tightened. Knit fear, knit exactly, but the sharp awareness that when people lose control, they reach for intimidation. I forwarded the message to Clara with a brief note. "They are escalating." Within minutes she replied, "Do not engage. Save everything. If they show up, call authorities. We can file for a protective order if needed." I stared at my quiet living room and realized I had been naive about one thing. I thought this would be a clean cut. I thought they would rage, then retreat. But people who feel entitled do not accept boundaries as facts. They treat boundaries as challenges. The next week proved it. In December 27th, my phone rang, and the caller ID showed Westbridge Preparatory. I answered with a calm I didn't fully feel. Miss Hale, the administrator said politely. We received a call from Mr. Mercer this morning. He stated you were no longer authorized to discuss the children's tuition and asked that all communication be routed exclusively through him and Mrs. Mercer. I nearly laughed. Adrian was finally taking responsibility, but only because he had no choice. That is correct, I said. Please note I am no longer involved. The administrator hesitated. There is also an outstanding balance for a school trip fee. $2,800. We have sent reminders. My jaw clenched. So he had not paid it. If course he had not. I thanked her, ended the call, and wrote the detail into my ingoing file. Then, as if in cue, Oliver sent me a voice message from his tablet. His voice was small and careful. Aunt Nora, Dad says you're mad at us. Are you mad at us? I felt something in my chest splinter. Children are collateral in adult vanity, and they do not understand why the ground suddenly shifts. I pressed record and kept my voice gentle. No, sweetheart. I am not mad at you. Not ever. Adults are figuring things out, and sometimes it gets messy, but you are loved. That does not change. A few minutes later, Sophie texted me a photo of a drawing, a shaky sketch of a house with a big tree and 3 stick figures holding hands. One figure had long hair and was labeled on N. I stayed at it until my eyes burned. That was the moment I understood the most painful truth of all. Adrian and Delilah had been using the kids as moral leverage, not because they cared about my relationship with them, but because they knew it was the only thing that could still reach me. They knew my heart would flinch for the children, even if my pride no longer did. So I made a decision that felt like surgery. I would not pay the bills again, but I would not abandon the kids either. I would stay present in ways that did not allow Adrian to siphon money or control the narrative. Ice cream dates, Sika games, art supplies sent directly to Sophie, a math workbook for Oliva delivered to him, net to the household budget. I would love them in a way that couldn't be weaponized. In January 3rd, Clara called me again. He contacted my office, she said. He wants to negotiate. I almost asked what he thought negotiation meant after 3 years of using my generosity as a private revenue stream, but I stayed quiet. He claims the money was a gift. Clara continued, her voice dry. He says you never specified repayment terms. I felt the familiar flash of disbelief, followed by an even colder calm. He texted me, I'll pay you back repeatedly, I said. He cried in my kitchen and called it a loan. Exactly, Clara replied. We have enough to apply pressure. He also asked if you would retract the lien if he signs a repayment plan. I stayed out my window at the snow, beginning to melt into gray slush, the way winter always reveals what it was hiding. Tell him we can discuss it, I said, but knit in his timeline. I net with emotional blackmail. 2 days later, the final humiliation arrived. Net from Adrian directly, but from the community he had tried to impress. A woman from the neighborhood posted in a local forum about people who pretend to be wealthy while failing to pay their obligations. Vague enough to avoid naming them, but specific enough that anyone who attended that Christmas party would recognize the story. The comments were brutal. Not because people cared about me, but because status-driven circles despise fraud more than they despise cruelty. Adrian had built his identity in being perceived as a winner. And now perception had turned on him like a pack. That was when he shot up at my house. It was late afternoon, the sun already sinking, and I saw his silhouette through the frosted glass of my front window. My pulse jumped. I didn't open the door immediately. I looked at him through the peephole. No velvet jacket, no confident posture. Just a man in a cheap coat, shoulders hunched, holding something in his hands. I opened the door enough to speak without inviting him in. What do you want? I asked. His eyes were red. His face looked older, as if the last week had peeled off a layer of arrogance, and exposed raw fear underneath. I need to talk, he said. Knit in the phone, please. I held the door frame, steadying myself. Talk, I said. He swallowed hard. I didn't think it would go that far, he whispered. I didn't think you'd really stop. The audacity of that sentence nearly took my breath away. Knit the cruelty, but the assumption that I would always remain predictable, always remain useful. You didn't think, I replied softly, because you didn't have to. I did the thinking for you. I did everything for you. He flinched as if I had struck him. Nora, he said, voice breaking, the kids are scared. Delilah is losing it. The bank called. The mortgage stup, I said quietly, and he stepped. Do not come to my door, and make your panic my responsibility again. He looked down at what he was holding. It was an envelope thinner than Clara's, but still official. I brought a proposal, he said, and his voice was almost ashamed. A repayment plan. A real one. I'll sign whatever. I need you to take the lien ESEF, so we can refinance and not lose the house. I stayed at him for a long moment, and the strangest thing happened. I didn't feel triumph. I felt grief, not for the money, but for the brother I kept hoping would exist somewhere under all this performance. I will review it, I said finally. Through Clara? Knit here. Knit now. He nutted quickly, eager, like a child offered a second chance. Then, as if he could not help himself, he added, if you do this, maybe we can fix things. Maybe you can come back. We can start over. I felt my throat tighten. You don't get to exile me and then invite me back when you need funding. I said, voice low and steady. A relationship is knit to membership you, revoke and restore based in convenience. He stayed at me blinking, as if hearing a language he never learned. I'm Suri, he whispered. I believed he was Suri. But I also knew Siri was not the same as changed. I took the envelope from his hands without touching his fingers. Go home, I said. Be a father. Tell Oliva and Sophie the truth. Tell them adults made mistakes, on it is knit their jib to fix them. He knitted again, then turned and walked down my steps like a man leaving a cot room, knit to sister's potch. When he disappeared into the twilight, I closed the door and leaned back against it, breathing through the ache in my abdomen and the ache in my chest. The collapse had begun as revenge, but it was becoming something else, something more complicated and more permanent. It was becoming a restructuring of my entire life, and the next step would determine whether Adrian was capable of living without a mask, or whether he would try one last time to steal his way back into the illusion. Began with a simple truth I had avoided for years, not because I didn't understand it, but because accepting it would have meant changing the role I had been playing since childhood. Adrian didn't see my help as generosity. He saw it as entitlement. He had been trained by my silence to believe I would always cushion his falls, and by Delilah's obsession with appearances to believe any lie was acceptable. As long as the picture looked perfect, that was the disease underneath everything. And if I wanted this to end, I had to treat the disease, not the symptoms. The envelope he handed me sat at my kitchen table like a fragile animal. I didn't open it right away. I wished dishes I had already washed. I reorganized a drawer that didn't need reorganizing. I made tea and forget to drink it. My body was still healing, and my mind was learning a new kind of stamina, the stamina of knit rushing to rescue. When I finally slit the envelope open, the proposal inside was written in Adrian's voice, even though it was clearly drafted with someone else's help. It offered monthly payments that looked responsible at a glance, but when I did the math, I realized it would take more than 13 years to repay what he owed, and that was without interest. The plan also required one thing from me immediately. I had to remove the lien so he could refinance the house. Translation, I had to release my leverage before he had proven anything. It was the same pattern, just dressed in better language. I scanned the last page and felt a cold laugh rise in my throat. At the bottom, there was a sentence about family reconciliation and restoring harmony. No mention of accountability. No mention of the fraud attempt. No mention of his Christmas speech. Harmony in Adrian's world meant I returned to my place and pretended the knife never existed. I forwarded the entire document to Clara with a short message. He wants leverage removed first. Thoughts? Her reply came quickly. Absolutely net. We can counter with a structured plan. That keeps the lien until a significant portion is repaid. Also, I recommend we include terms addressing attempted unauthorized charges. That matters. I stayed at Clara's message and felt grateful for her clarity. Friends like Clara do not allow you to lie to yourself. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a video call request. Delilah. I considered ignoring it. Then I thought of Oliva's voice asking if I was mad at them. I accepted the call, but I kept my face neutral. Delilah appeared in the screen with perfect hair and perfect makeup, which would have been impressive if it didn't look like Amma. Her eyes, though, were red-rimmed. She was trying to maintain the role, even as the stage burned behind her. Nora, she began speaking slowly, as if she were handling a delicate negotiation. Thank you for being willing to consider Adrian's proposal. I didn't correct her assumption that I had agreed to anything. I haven't agreed, I said. I'm reviewing it. Her smile tightened. Of course. But we really need to move quickly. The refinance window is complicated right now. Delilah, I said quietly. Why are you calling me? Knit Adrian. You? She inhaled as if my question offended her. Because Adrian is emotional, she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. Because I'm trying to be the adult here. The irony was almost painful. You want to be the adult, I said. Then tell me the truth. What is the actual situation? Her eyes flicked away from the camera for half a second. We're just under pressure, she said. The investors backed out because of misunderstandings. Knit misunderstandings, I corrected. Lies? She stayed at me. And I saw something ugly criss her expression. Resentment. You didn't have to expose it like that, she hissed. You could have handled it privately. You uninvited me privately, I said, voice steady. You humiliated me privately. You used me privately. I didn't create the truth, Delilah. I just stopped hiding it. She swallowed on shifted tactics instantly, like a person flipping through scripts until one works. The kids are suffering, she said, and her voice grew softer. Oliva cried last night. Sophie asked why you hate us. There it was. The leva? The children. Do not use them, I said, and my tone sharpened for the first time. Do not put idle consequences on they shoulders to manipulate me. Her face hardened. So you admit you're doing this to punish us? I leaned closer to the screen. I'm doing this to stop being punished, I said. For 3 years I paid your bills and swallowed your disrespect. That wasn't kindness anymore. That was self-erasure. I'm done. Her eyes flashed. You think you're so noble, she spat. Sitting in your little house, with your little job, writing other people's stories, pretending you're above us. That insult used to work on me. It used to make me shrink. This time it made me strangely calm. My little job, I repeated softly. The one that funded your entire life. She opened her mouth, then closed it. And I realized she had never truly respected what I did, because she only respected what could be photographed. She recovered quickly. Fine, she said, voice flat. If you're going to be like this, then you need to understand what happens next. If we lose the house, the kids change schools. They lose the friends, that stability, and everyone will know why. Everyone already knows, I replied, and it was not cruelty. It was fact. And the kids will survive. They will adapt. What they won't survive is being raised inside a lie that teaches them love depends on aesthetics. Delilah stayed at me as if I had slapped her with a merle. She could knit by her way out of. You're enjoying this, she whispered, accusing. I shook my head slowly. No. I'm grieving. There's a difference. She ended the call without saying goodbye. The screen went black, and I sat there for a long time, my heart beat slow and heavy. An hour later, Adrian texted me, I'm coming by tonight. We need to talk face to face. I replied with one line, no. Communicate. Through Clara. A second message came through immediately, you can't do this. You're acting like a stranger. That line was almost funny, because it contained the truth in reverse. I had been acting like a stranger to myself for years, betraying my own boundaries to maintain his comfort. Now I was finally acting like the person I should have been all along. That evening there was a knock at my door. Knit Adrian. A woman I recognized from photos in Delilah's social media. Her mother. Perfect coat, expensive boots. lips pressed into a thin line of superiority. She stood in my potch like she owned it. "Nora Hale?" she asked, though she clearly knew. "Yes. I'm Margaret," she said, as if the name alone should intimidate me. "Delilah's mother. If Koss? The cavalry. What can I do for you?" I asked, keeping my voice polite. Margaret looked past me into my house, assessing, judging, calculating. "I've come to end this unpleasantness," she said. "Delilah is under extreme stress. Adrian is humiliated. And the children, please don't," I said softly, cutting her off. "Do not use the children as a weapon." Her nostrils flared. "This is not a weapon. This is reality. Families make accommodations for each other." "Accommodations," I repeated, and I felt the old anger rise, cold and clean. "Is that what you call 3 years of me, paying they bills while being mecked for my aesthetic?" Margaret's eyes hardened. "Money can be repaid," she said dismissively. "But reputation, Nora, reputation is priceless. You embarrass them in front of people who matter." "People who matter," I echoed. "So I don't matter." She tilted her head slightly, and the condescension was almost elegant. "Yo, his sister," she said. "Your role is to support him. Nit compete with him." There it was. The worldview. The hierarchy. The script written long before I entered the room. I looked at Margaret and understood that Delilah did not create this mentality. She inherited it. She was raised inside it, trained to believe shame was worse than debt, appearance worse than honesty, and that other people existed as props for her family's image. Margaret stepped closer. "I'm prepared to write you a check," she said, lowering her voice as if fearing a bribe was kindness. "Not the full amount of costs, but enough to satisfy you. You remove the lien, we move forward, and this goes away." My stomach turned, not because of the money, but because of the arrogance of thinking I could be bought into silence. I held the doorframe and met her eyes. "I don't want a check," I said. "I want accountability. And I want boundaries." Margaret's mouth tightened. You're being emotional." "No," I replied. "I'm being accurate." Her patience snapped. "If you continue," she said, each word clipped, "Delilah will ensure you never see those children again." My chest tightened. Knit fear. Knit panic. A slow, profound rage. "You're threatening to use children as hostages," I said quietly. "Do you hear yourself?" Margaret lifted her chin. "I'm informing you of consequences." I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "Then here are mine," I said. "If you attempt to interfere with my relationship with Oliva and Sophie, Clara will file immediately. And I will make sure every court document includes the fraud attempt, the unpaid tuition, and the way you came to my door to intimidate a recovering surgery patient." Margaret's eyes widened a fraction. For the first time, she looked less like a queen and more like a person who realized this was not a casual social battle she could win with status. "You would do that," she murmured, shocked. "Yes," I said. "Because I'm done being quiet." She stood there in the cold for a long moment, recalculating. Then she turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door and leaned back against it, breathing slowly. My hands were shaking, but my spine felt straight. The next message came the following morning from Clara. "They are requesting mediation," she wrote. "They want terms. They also want a confidentiality clause." A confidentiality clause. Of course. They did not want truth. They wanted containment. I stayed at the message and realized Part 5 was not about money anymore. It was about power, about who controlled the story, and whether I would once again let myself be edited out for the comfort of people who never respected me. I typed back to Clara, "We can mediate. No confidentiality clause. If they want silence, they can pay it back in full." I set the phone down and felt my heartbeat slow. The next move would decide everything. Because once you refuse to be silenced, people either learn to meet you with truth, or they try to destroy you for refusing to disappear. Began the way every real turning point begins, quietly, with paperwork on posture and the uncomfortable reality that emotions do not matter in a room. What consequences are being negotiated? Clara scheduled mediation for the second week of January at a small office downtown, neutral territory, fluorescent lights, glass conference table. A pitcher of water no one actually wanted. I arrived early because I always arrive early. The habit of someone who has spent her life preventing disasters. My stitches still pulled when I sat too long, but I wore it like a private reminder that my body had survived being cut open and stitched back together. And so had my life. Clara was already there with a slim folder, her hair pinned back, her expression calm in that way lawyers cultivate when they are about to which people reveal who they are. Remember, she said as I sat beside her, you don't have to justify your boundaries. You state terms. They respond. I nodded, and in that moment I realized how often I had mistaken explaining myself for being reasonable, when in truth explaining myself had only ever given Adrian more angles to argue from. The door opened and they walked in, as if entering a courtroom they expected to own. Adrian first, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, eyes dotting everywhere except at me. Delilah beside him, immaculate as always, dressed like an apology she didn't intend to fie. And behind them Margaret, her mother, wearing that same expensive coat, the same superior stillness, as if we were all extras in her family story. Seeing her they confirmed what I already knew. Delilah hadn't come to negotiate, she had come to win. The mediator introduced himself, set ground rules, and asked Adrian to state the purpose of the meeting. Adrian cleared his throat, forcing a tone of wounded reasonableness. We're here because my sister made an emotional decision that affected our children, he began. I felt Clara's hand lightly touch my forearm under the table, a silent reminder knit to react. Adrian continued, we want to resolve this as a family. We're willing to set up a repayment plan, but the lien has to be removed, so we can refinance and stabilize. Nora's actions created public embarrassment that harmed our professional opportunities. He said embarrassment the way other people say injury, as if shame was a physical wound. The mediator turned to me. Miss Hale. Clara nodded slightly. I spoke evenly. I cancelled payments I was never legally obligated to make. I did so after being explicitly told I was unwelcome because I didn't fit their aesthetic. I also have documentation of an attempted unauthorized charge and my credit card by Mr. Mercer. I am here to discuss repayment of documented loans. I am not here to restore anyone's image. Delilah's lips pressed together, and Margaret's eyes narrowed like I had violated an unspoken rule by saying the truth out loud. The mediator asked Clara to outline my terms. Clara slid a single-page document across the table. Our client's position is straightforward, she said. The total debt is $153,412, supported by bank records and written acknowledgments. We propose a repayment plan over 36 months, with interest at a modest rate. The lien remains in place until 50% of principal is repaid. No confidentiality clause. Any future contact regarding payments is through counsel. Additionally, due to the attempted unauthorized transaction, our client requires that Mr. Mercer sign an acknowledgement and agreement prohibiting any further use of her financial accounts. Adrian's face went pale. 36 months was real. It meant sacrifice. It meant the costume closet had to close. Delilah's composure cracked first. That is impossible, she snapped. When it criminals. When it's signing anything that suggests fraud. Clara didn't blink. Your husband attempted a $5,000 charge in my client's card after her payments were cancelled, she said, voice calm as glass. The bank has record. That is not a suggestion. That is a fact. Adrian's mouth opened as if to deny, then closed again. His silence was an admission. Margaret leaned forward, voice smooth and cold. This is extortion, she said. You are leveraging family conflict for financial gain. I looked directly at her. No, I said quietly. Extortion is threatening someone's relationship with children unless they comply. Like you did in my potch. Margaret's eyes flickered. Just once, the smallest tell that I had struck something true. Delilah's cheeks flushed. You are twisting everything, she said. You humiliated us in front of investors. You made us look unstable. You did it on purpose. I didn't make you unstable, I replied. I stopped hiding it. Adrian slammed his palm in the table, the first real crack in his controlled facade. Do you hear yourself? He balked. You talk like you're some hero. You're punishing us because you couldn't handle win conversation. The mediator raised a hand, but I spoke before he could. It wasn't one conversation, I said, and my voice stayed level, which made it sharper. It was 3 years. 3 years of me paying your bills while you ridiculed me. 3 years of you accepting help while calling me stagnant. The Christmas call was just the first time you said the quiet part out loud. Adrian's nostrils flared and then, like a man reaching for the easiest weapon, he said the thing he thought would soften me. The kids, he whispered, voice cracking, is struggling. Sophie keeps asking why you don't come over anymore. If they lose the house, stop. I said again, the same word I had used in my potch, and it landed with the same finality. Do not use them. Delilah's eyes flashed. Then what do you want? She demanded. Do you want us to grovel? Fine. I'm sorry, Adrian said, you didn't fit the aesthetic. There. Happy. Now take the lien off. The apology was a receipt, knit remorse. I stayed at her and felt something settle in my chest, a calm sadness. That's not an apology, I said softly. That's a transaction. The mediator tried to steer the conversation back to numbers. He asked Adrian what he could realistically pay. Adrian swallowed, glanced at Delilah, then said, we can't do 800 a month. Maybe 1,000. Clara's pen paused. I did the math instantly. At 1,000 a month, it would take more than 12 years without interest. And that assumed he would not miss a single payment, which was almost laughable. Margaret exhaled in a faint sound of disgust, as if the very concept of paying back money was beneath them. Clara responded with calm precision. That isn't acceptable. That amount does not represent good faith. Delilah leaned forward again, her voice dripping into something almost threatening. If you push this, she said, you will destroy our family permanently. Adrian will never forgive you. The old me would have flinched at that. The old me would have tried to rescue the relationship by surrendering again. But something in me had changed. He already destroyed it, I replied quietly. I'm just refusing to pretend it isn't destroyed. Adrian's eyes went glossy, not with empathy, but with self-pity. You think you're so righteous, he said. You always did. You always thought you were better because you were responsible. I let out a slow breath. I never wanted to be better, I said. I wanted to be loved without being used. There was a silence after that, and in that silence I saw something shift. Knit in Delilah. Knit in Margaret. But in Adrian. For a moment his face looked stripped of performance. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had been sprinting in place for years and finally felt the burn. The mediator suggested a break. Adrian stood and walked toward the hallway, shoulders slumped. Delilah followed, whispering harshly. Margaret stayed seated, eyes on me like a warning. When the door closed behind them, Clara leaned toward me. You did well, she murmured. They came here expecting you to fold. I stared at the empty water glass in front of me. What happens now? I asked. Clara's eyes were steady. Now we see if Adrian is capable of separating himself from Delilah, and her mother long enough to choose reality. 10 minutes later, Adrian came back alone. Delilah and Margaret remained in the hallway. His hands were shaking slightly as he sat. He didn't look at Clara at first. He looked at me. I can't do 36 months, he said, voice low. But I can do better than 1,000. I can get a real job. A full-time job. I can sell the second Kia. I can't stop pretending. The last words came out like an admission he hated. I studied him carefully. For years I had heard premises wrapped in panic. This sounded different. Nit confident. Nit charming. Just exhausted. What are you effering? Clara asked. Adrian swallowed. 2,000 a month, he said. And I'll sign whatever you want about the credit card. I won't touch anything. I'll send payments through an account you choose. But I need the lien reduced enough to refinance. If we lose the house, Delilah will take the kids and I'll have nothing. I'll be sleeping in someone's couch. I held his gaze. He wanted me to save him again. But there was a difference now. He was finally naming the cost. Delilah won't agree, Clara said bluntly. Adrian looked down. I know, he whispered. But I'm agreeing. That sentence hung in the air, like the first honest thing he had said in years. The mediator asked if Delilah would join. Adrian hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet, he said. She'll sabotage it. I felt a strange ache, because I knew what it meant to be trapped between the person you married and the reality you avoided. But that trap was his choice, not mine. Clara outlined a counter, a 5-year plan at $2,000 a month, with a lump sum payment at 6 months from sale of assets. Leon reduced only after the first 12 payments cleared, and strict non-interference with my relationship with the children. Adrian nodded, eyes wet. I'll do it, he said. Then Delilah stormed back into the room like a gust of cold air. What is this? She snapped, seeing Adrian's pistua, the papers. You're agreeing to her demands. I'm agreeing to pay her back, Adrian said. And his voice cracked, but he didn't look away. Delilah stared at him as if he had betrayed her. You're choosing her over me, she hissed. I'm choosing reality, he said, and in that moment, the room went still. Margaret appeared behind Delilah, eyes sharp. Adrian, she said calmly. You are not signing anything. We will handle this privately. Adrian shook his head once, a small movement that felt enormous. No, he said. You handled it for 3 years. And I let you. I'm done. Delilah's face twisted with rage and fear. If you sign, we have finished, she whispered. Adrian's shoulders slumped, and for the first time I saw him not as a golden boy or a villain, but as a man who had built his identity in illusion and was now being forced to choose between illusion and integrity. He looked at me. Nora, he said, I can't lose them. The mediator interrupted gently. This is a negotiation session, not a family therapy session, he said, trying to keep control. But the truth was, it had become both. Delilah stepped closer to Adrian, voice icy. Then don't, she said. Don't sign. Let your sister have her tantrum. She'll fold like she always does. I felt my stomach turn, not from insult, but from recognition. That was the story she believed. That was the story I had helped write by folding every time. I looked at Adrian. This is your decision, I said quietly. Not mine. If you want to repay, I will accept a fair plan. If you don't, I will pursue it through court. Either way, I'm done being your bonk. Adrian closed his eyes for a long second, as if listening to a voice inside him he had ignored for years. Then he picked up the pen. Delilah gasped. Margaret's face hardened. Adrian signed. When the pen lifted, the ad changed. Delilah stared at the signature like it was a death certificate. Fine, she said, voice shaking. Then you can explain to the kids why we are moving. She turned and walked out. Margaret followed, leaving without a glance at me. Adrian sat there with his head bowed, breathing like someone who had just jumped off a cliff and was waiting to see if he would survive the fall. Clara gathered the papers, calm and efficient. The mediator confirmed next steps. And I sat there, feeling something I didn't expect. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Relief, yes, but also sorrow, because even when a person chooses reality, reality still custs. When we left the building, the cold air hit my face like a reset. Adrian stood by the curb, hands in his pockets. I'm sorry, he said again, softer this time. I nutted once. Pay it back, I said. That's how you apologize. He swallowed. Will you still see the kids? If you don't use them as leverage, I replied. Yes. He nutted, eyes glossy. I won't. As I walked to my hinda, I realized the story had crossed a line. This was no longer about a Christmas invite, or a party, or a humiliation. It was about whether Adrian could become the kind of man who didn't need me to hold him up, and whether I could become the kind of woman who didn't confuse suffering with loyalty. And the next chapter would begin the moment Delilah decided whether she would accept Adrian's new reality or punish him for it. Began with fallout, not the dramatic kind that explodes all at once, but the slow unraveling that happens when a carefully staged life loses its scaffolding. Within 48 hours of mediation, Adrian's signature became the pivot point of his entire household. Delilah didn't scream at him in public, not at first. She did something cold. She treated him like a liability. She stopped speaking to him in complete sentences. She communicated through clip directives about parking, appointments, and damage control. She moved through the house like a woman handling a flood, trying to salvage the expensive parts first. And because everything in her world had always been about optics, her first instinct was not to rebuild the truth, but to rebuild the image. I learned most of it through fragments at first. A text from Oliva that said, "Mim is mad at dad. They keep whispering." A photo Sophie sent of cardboard boxes stacked in a hallway. A voice note from Adrian that arrived late at night, his breathing heavy, the background quiet, his voice small. "She's calling her parents," he said. "She's saying she's done." He did not ask me to fix it. That alone was new. He just stated it like a weather report, like a man watching the sky and realizing he had waited too long to build shelter. The next message came from Clara. "Delilah's mother contacted my office," she wrote. "They want to reopen terms. They pushing confidentiality again. They also hinted at pursuing family. Caught limitations regarding your contact with the children." My stomach tightened, knit with panic, but with the sharp clarity that Margaret would not accept losing. People like her do not process boundaries as boundaries. They process them as insults. I called Clara immediately. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means intimidation," Clara replied, calm and precise. "They want leverage. They want to scare you into silence. They do not have a direct legal basis to cut you off unless Adrian participates. But they can't make noise. The best defense is documentation and consistency." "I have everything saved," I said. "Good," Clara replied. "And Nora, keep your communication with the kids clean. No talk about money. No talk about Delilah. Only love and stability. If they try to paint you as disruptive, you want your record to look unshakable." I understood the game they were trying to play, and it made me sick. They had no problem using my money as a private pipeline for years. But the moment I stopped paying, they tried to reframe me as dangerous. That is what entitled people do when the supply is cut. They do not grieve the loss of help. They attack the person who stopped providing it. 3 days later, Adrian called me in the middle of the afternoon. His voice sounded like he hadn't slept. "They're moving out," he said. "Delilah and the kids. Tonight." I held my phone tighter. "Where are they going?" "Connecticut," he replied, and my chest tightened with recognition. Back to Margaret's estate. Back to the safety net of wealth and control. Back to the place where Adrian would become a footnote in Delilah's story instead of the main character. "Did she tell the kids anything?" I asked. Adrian exhaled, shaky. "She told them we're taking a break. She told them you're complicated." I closed my eyes. Complicated is what people call truth when it inconveniences them. "Are you going with them?" I asked. There was a pause long enough to feel like a wound reopening. "No," Adrian whispered. "Margaret won't allow it. She said I'm unstable. She said my decision to sign was proof. I'm not fit to lead the family." The phrase "fit to lead" made my jaw tighten, because it revealed exactly how Delilah's world worked. Leadership was not about responsibility. It was about control. "What do you want?" I asked quietly. Adrian sounded like he was swallowing shame. "I want to see my kids," he said. "And I want them to not hate me." I breathed in slowly. "Then you need to show up," I said. "Not with speeches. With consistency. With work. With action. Pay what you signed. Get the job. Build a routine. And don't let Delilah rewrite history without pushback." His voice broke. "I don't know how to fight her family." "You don't have to fight them," I said. "You have to stop surrendering to them." That evening I drove to Adrian's house with a small bag of groceries and a simple intention. Not to rescue him, but to make sure he did not spiral into the kind of case that would give Margaret exactly what she wanted. When I arrived, the driveway looked like a scene after a storm. Booksies. Suitcases. The moving van. Delilah's friends, women with perfect coats and perfect hair, standing in a cluster near the porch, whispering with the same hungry curiosity people pretend is concern. Delilah herself stood at the front door, directing movers like a general. When she saw my Hinda, her expression tightened into disgust that she could not fully hide. Adrian was in the steps, watching it all with a hollow look, like a man witnessing his own eviction from the life he thought he owned. He walked toward my car as I stepped out, and I saw the tremor in his hands. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. "I'm dripping this EF," I said, lifting the grocery bag. Food. Nothing else. Delilah's head snapped toward us. She walked over, her face composed, but her eyes sharp. What is she doing here? She asked Adrian, knit me as if I were furniture. Adrian's shoulders tightened. She's bringing groceries, he said. Delilah's laugh was short and cruel. How generous. Does the bunk have a new charity program? I felt something cold move through me, but I did not respond the way she wanted. I kept my voice even. Delilah, I said, I'm not here to fight. I'm here because Oliver and Sophie matter to me. That's all. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then stay out of it, she hissed. You already did enough. You mean I stopped paying, I corrected. She flinched as if I had said something obscene. You humiliated us, she whispered. You destroyed everything we built. You built it in lies, I said quietly. And you called me a loser while standing in my money. Delilah's eyes flashed with something close to hatred. You think you're so superior, she said. But you're alone. You don't have a family. You don't have what I have. For a hot beat, the words landed where she intended, because loneliness is a tender place, especially after surgery. Especially in a holiday season that had already been poisoned. But then I looked past her and saw Oliva carrying a small backpack, his face confused, his eyes dotting between adults like a child, trying to predict weather from shadows. Sophie stood behind him, clutching a stuffed animal, her mouth set in a line too serious for 8 years old. They were watching.
They were sobbing?
And I realized Delilah's cruelty was not just aimed at me. It was a lesson she was teaching her children about worth. I softened my tone not for Delilah, but for them. I'm not alone, I said. I have myself. And I have love for you too, no matter what adults decide. Delilah turned toward the kids instantly, putting in a bright mask. Come on, babies, she chirped, voice suddenly sweet. We're going somewhere better. Better. Another word that meant expensive. Oliva looked at Adrian, hesitating. Adrian stepped forward, his voice shaking. Buddy, he said, I'll come see you soon. I promise. Delilah's head whipped toward him. Do not make promises you can't keep, she snapped. Then she looked at the kids again, smile back in place. Daddy needs time to figure himself out. The subtle poison in that sentence was masterful. She made him sound unstable without saying it directly. She made herself sound like the responsible one without stating it. Margaret's influence polished and lethal. Oliva's eyes filled with tears. Are you coming? He asked his father. Adrian's throat moved as he swallowed. Knit today, he whispered. Oliva nodded slowly like a child forced to accept disappointment as normal. Sophie glanced at me, her small fingers tightening around her stuffed animal. I crouched slightly, careful with my stitches, and met her eyes. I have something for you both, I said softly. Knit money. Just something from me. Delilah's eyes narrowed. We don't need anything from you. I ignored her and reached into my coat pocket, pulling out 2 small envelopes. Inside were printed photos. Nothing fancy. One photo of me with a liver at a muddy soccer game months earlier, both of us laughing. Another of Sophie at my kitchen table drawing, her face serious and focused. In the back of each photo I had written a simple line. I'm always here. I handed them to the kids, net to Delilah. Oliva took his carefully. Sophie clutched hers like it mattered. Delilah looked as if I had committed a social crime, but she couldn't snatch them without looking cruel, in front of the movers and neighbors. That was the only reason she allowed it. The van doors closed. Delilah climbed into the passenger seat of her mother's black SUV. Because of course Margaret had arrived in something that looked like control and wheels. The kids get in the back. Oliva pressed his face to the window as the car began to move. He raised his hand in a small wave. I lifted mine back. Adrian stood beside me in the driveway, shoulders slumped, watching the taillights disappear. When the last vehicle turned the corner, he exhaled like someone who had been holding his breath for years. She hates me, he whispered. She doesn't hate you, I said carefully. She hates losing control. He looked at me, eyes glassy. On the kids? They don't hate you, I said. They confused.
Confusion. Confusion isn't hatred.
It's a question. Your job is to answer it with actions. He nodded slowly, and then his face crumpled. He turned away, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his hand like a boy again. I messed up, he said, voice breaking. I messed up so badly. I didn't comfort him the way I used to. By effering to fix it. I let him sit with the truth. Then I said the only thing that mattered. Then do better, I murmured. Knit for me. For them. For yourself. 2 weeks passed. Adrian get the jib he had always insisted was beneath him. A mid-level sales role at an HVAC company. He texted me the first day, net asking for praise, just stating it like a fact. Started today. 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Real paycheck in 2 weeks. I replied, good. The first payment arrived in time, $2,000, transferred through the account Clara specified. A clean memo line. Payment 1. Seeing it hit my account, didn't it make me happy the way revenge fantasies premise? It made me calm. Because calm is what accountability feels like. Meanwhile, Delilah began her next campaign. She posted carefully curated photos from Connecticut snow-dusted trees, children smiling in expensive sweaters, captions about fresh starts and protecting peace. Her friends commented hearts and affirmations. Margaret's circle applauded her narrative. And then, one afternoon, I received an email from a family lawyer's office in Connecticut requesting information about my involvement with the children. Clara reviewed it and laughed once sharply. Fishing expedition, she said. They want to build a record that you are disruptive. What do we do? I asked. We respond politely, Clara said. We provide nothing beyond what is required. And you keep being consistent. That night, Oliva called me from an unknown number. Aunt Nora. He whispered. Mim says I'm not supposed to call you. But I wanted to tell you, I kept the picture. My throat tightened. I'm glad, I said softly. How are you? Okay, he said, then hesitated. Dad says he's sorry. Is he really? I closed my eyes. He's trying, I said. I'm trying, matters. Oliva was quiet for a moment, then asked. Are you coming to my game when I visit Dad? The word visit stung. A child should not have to categorize his father like a location. Yes, I said. If you want me there, I'll be there. I want you, he whispered. Okay, I murmured. I'm here. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet of my living room and realized the story was narrowing to its final truth. Money had been the catalyst, but the real battle was about narrative. Delilah and Margaret wanted to control the narrative by painting me as unstable and Adrian as rescued. Adrian, for the first time, was attempting to rewrite himself as accountable. And I was learning to love the children without letting my love be used as a chain around my neck. The next chapter would not be a potty or a repo truck. It would be a courtroom-adjacent battle, fought with consistency, documentation, and the simple power of knit bending. And somewhere in the middle of that, there would be a moment when Adrian would have to stand in front of his children and tell them the truth. Not the polished version, not the convenient version, but the honest one.